Hello there, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for making time for us. Eid Mubarak to all Muslims. This is Newsdeck. I am Abu Bakr Abdullahi. Welcome to the broadcast. To our top story now. Tension is high in Emukaba village, Lurambi constituency after a police officer enforcing curfew allegedly attempted to rape a 15-year-old girl who is a former student. Residents now want the police officer transferred. Mulindi Kerry with the details.
According to Stella Nambie, the aunt to the victim, the heinous act happened few minutes to 7 o'clock when the Form 1 girl was sent to her place to collect vegetables before the said police officer attempted to force himself on the young lady.
Huyo mtoto alipokuwa kwa njia akikuja, alikutana na ofisa mmoja, akamshika mkono na akamwambia ngoja niende narudi. Kaanza kumguza matiti. Wenye mtoto alikuja kufika kwangu akaogopa kurudi. Akaniambia mama, naomba unisindikize. Kuna ofisa hapo kwa njia. Alikuwa ananishika matiti na nimemdanganya narudi, sasa naomba unisindikishe. Tulikuja na mtoto kufika penye alikuwa ameniambia, hatukumpata. Kutoka kidogo kusonga hatua, kuna kanisa hapo Mkaba PH. Tukasikia mtu akitembea nyuma yetu. Venye niligeuka kuangalia nyuma, nikapata ni huyo afisa akiwa mbeba kiboko juu, anataka kunichapa. Nikapiga nduru nikamuuliza Roni, unataka kunichapa nimekosa nini?
Despite the attempted rape, the father to the victim says he has forgiven the officer and only calls on authorities to transfer him to another station.
Kwa sababu neno linasema tusamee mwenzetu. Kafika wakati tukaona ya kwamba binafsi na ndugu zangu ambao tulikuwa pale tukamsamea. Tukamwambia haina haja.
Kakamega County is experiencing a series of attempted rapes and rape cases among school-going children during this coronavirus pandemic season, and now the county stares at a possible rise of number of early pregnancies. This has attracted the attention of leaders in the region.
Mtu akiingilia mtoto wako wa 15 years, amfanyie rape, amwambukize ugonjwa, ampe mimba ya mapema, wewe parent, wewe ndio utabeba mzigo huo. Hata mimi ni mhubiri, ninaamini msamaha. But sasa jehanamu iko kwa nini? Si jehanamu iko kwa wakosaji? Kwa nini Mungu hakusema tu watu wote mbinguni? Si Mungu aliweka jehanamu? Na sisi jehanamu yetu ni jela. Mtu kama huyo Roni mnasema huyo mimi nitaenda kufunga yeye.
Nimesikitika hapa Lurambi kupata ya kwamba sisi tumeshikwa na jangwa na askari amechukua mtoto wa shule amemweka kwa nyumba. Hiyo ni ungwana? Hiyo ni ungwana? Na pia hapa Lurambi tena askari mwingine tena amechukua mtoto mwingine huko Emukaba. Mimi nina huzuni, na pia nina huzuni hapo na Baholo. Kuna watoto watatu wadogo sana walitoroka nyumbani kwa ajili ya mama wa kambo na wakapatikana huko Malava. Pole sana. Kwa hivyo mimi kama mama nasema ya kwamba wazazi tuangalie watoto wetu kwa hii muhula ya corona.
Mulindi Kerry, TV47 in the county of Kakamega.
Elsewhere, a section of religious leaders from North Rift region have urged the government to reopen churches. The leaders have criticized the government for reopening hotels and bars and not considering to reopen churches and mosques, which they say are key institutions in the society. The religious leaders have, however, cautioned the government from reopening schools before proper preventive measures are put in place to avoid the spread of coronavirus in schools.
We are aware that our country is going through a very difficult stage in its existence, brought about by the unprecedented coronavirus, locust invasion, flood, landslides, and closures of schools. The above circumstances have caused hopelessness among Kenyans, leading to the rise of domestic violence, loss of livelihood, loss of lives, idleness among school-going children.
As religious leaders, we commend both national and county governments for the efforts they have put in place to manage and mitigate the effects of COVID-19, especially in sensitization and awareness creation among Kenyans. And so we want to pray that churches will be opened, they will be more obedient, as we said. They have always been very good in shaping, especially the mood of the nation at critical times. Let us not forget this. The church is very good in shaping, and the church is always very cosmopolitan. The church will always talk about we are our brothers keepers, we are all sons and daughters of Adam, and so on. So we want the country, especially the leadership at all levels, to understand that the churches will observe the rules. If those in hotels, those in bars are given opportunity to gather, do you think they are better placed than the church to observe social distance?
Elsewhere, Mavoko lawmaker Patrick Makau has welcomed the Wiper Party's resolution to partner with the Jubilee, but insists that a share of the ministerial positions be shared to the party leader. The Wiper lawmaker said as long as the party leadership has offered to work together with the Jubilee government for the sake of the country's unity, it will be prudent for them to benefit from the merger. Take a look.
Rais Kenyatta amekuwa akisema tuache siasa tufanye maendeleo, na makamu yake mara kwa mara na timu yake ya tangatanga wamekuwa kitangatanga wakipiga siasa, and I think hiyo imemkasirisha rais.
Yes. Maetembeza hizo sionde. Lakini
and you are not elected to be a majority leader, you are elected to be a leader. And there are many leaders who can share the same responsibility. We should live by complementing each other, not by you thinking that you are special in any way. You are not. Unajua utamu wa kazi ni malipo. Kwa hivyo hatuwezi kwenda kushikana na Jubilee ili hali hakuna vile wanawaipa watafaidika. Na unajua katika demokrasia ni scratch my back, I scratch yours. I urge all donors and well-wishers to contribute generously to this cause, because it is a world over pandemic and people are suffering, particularly in Africa.
Moving on, the National Gun Owners Association has sensitized 1,900 police officers on COVID-19 preventive measures over the last 1 month. The association says it targets to train 75,000 officers across the country and has so far covered 10 counties. Take a look.
Our concern today has been 100% trying to get the right information to the people, especially to the police. As you know, most of the people are actually saying that the police are creating stigmatization. The police are actually making people feel like the fight about corona is a fight about people being taken to quarantine and all these things. So with the risk information and all this risk communication that we've been able to be trained on how to pass that correct information to them, they are now understanding much better on how well they should protect themselves first.
The police force or the police service are the team that is there in the front line. They're the ones who are dealing with, who are manning the roadblocks. They're the ones who are manning the isolation centers. They're the ones who are interacting with the suspects. And with that, they are technically more susceptible to this infection. And as you know that we have about 75,000 police officers. And we are hoping and praying that we'll be able to reach out to all this. The only hindrance that we're having at the moment is, of course, I've said, we have few TOTs who are training and also the resources.
There was a need for such a training because these officers are getting in contact with so many people while executing their services in different places. And they may get that disease and transmit it to their families and even the other people.
Elsewhere, Muslim faithfuls in Migori County kept off celebrations of Eid in large numbers following the government's directive to worship from homes so as to keep safe from the dreaded coronavirus. This year's celebrations were different, with a small group of Muslim faithfuls spotted hanging around their homes. Most of them opted not to speak on camera. Elsewhere, the Kenya Secondary Schools Heads Association, Vihiga chapter, has donated medical equipment and foodstuff to Vihiga County COVID-19 Emergency Response Committee to combat COVID-19 pandemic in the county. Mulindi Keri tells us more.
In his address, Vihiga Governor Wilbur Tichilo was grateful to the teaching fraternity for the noble gesture. The county boss said the donation will go a long way in addressing the challenges the pandemic has posed in the world.
This will go a long way helping our health facilities. So all what we have donated will be given to those who deserve. And overall, after this pandemic, we will account to you and every other donor what we have received from you. To date, we have received quite a lot of donations from various groups and individuals and organizations.
Sabatia Member of Parliament Alfred Agoi also made a donation of 600 bags of maize and 8,000 pieces of surgical masks to his constituents who have been pushed to the wall with the coronavirus pandemic, and majority can hardly afford a meal a day.
Nimeleta leo mahindi magunia 600, 90 kilogram bags. Nimeleta barakoa 8,000 surgical masks. Mimi kawaida nikiwa na watu wangu nawaletea mahindi safi.
Vihiga woman representative Beatrice Adagala has called on the government to hasten the process of releasing food to Kenyans after the National Assembly passed a budget to help the government cushion its citizens who are hard-pressed with the dwindling economy.
Na hizo pesa vile tumepitisha zinatakana ziteremke hapa chini kwa counties, pia governors mkipata hizo pesa mnunue vyakula, barakoa na sabuni zisambaze kwa hao watu wote. Na zisipofika hizo pesa zikichelewa, pia governor uko na ruhusa kusema sisi turudi bunge tuende kupiga makelele tuone hiyo pesa inakuja ama ikuji.
Yaona chakula wanasema tu ngoja. Ndio mimi kama gavana wenu nilisema mimi sitangoja, kwa vile kama watu watakufa njaa na tunangoja hiyo chakula kikuja nani atakula?
Mulindi Kerry, TV47 in the county of Vihiga.
Thank you, Mulindi Kerry, for that report. And at that point, we are taking a short break here on News Deck. We still have a lot lined up for you. We'll be back with more news after this break. Welcome back. Thank you for choosing to stay with us here on News Deck. Tomorrow news now. Mombasa Senator Mohamed Faki has launched door-to-door coronavirus sensitization campaign in informal settlements across the coastal city. According to Faki, awareness levels of the COVID-19 pandemic among slum dwellers is still very low, despite a surge in the numbers. Take a look.
Kama tunavyojua janga la corona limeingia hapa kwetu zaidi ya miezi miwili na watu wengi wameathirika na wengine wamepoteza maisha. Kwa hivyo leo tukaona iko haja ya kuja kuwahamasisha wananchi kwamba ugonjwa uko na vile vile pia tuwapatie barakoa ili waweze kujikinga wakati wanapotoka nje kwa shughuli zao za kimaisha. Tumeweza kukabidhi hapa kijijini barakoa 1000 ambazo zitagawanywa kwa wananchi bila malipo yote. Tumeona sehemu zingine kama vile mji wa kale ama Old Town wameweza kuwekewa ile cessation of movement ambayo imeathiri sana kibiashara na kimazingira. Kwa hivyo tunataka swala hilo lisifike katika vijiji vingine katika eneo letu la Mombasa.
Kitu tunachoomba ni kwamba serikali itambue vikundi vilivyoko. Serikali itambue wao vikundi ambavyo vinajaribu kuhamasisha jambo hili la corona. Ni janga likubwa sana, ni janga la jamii na janga la kitaifa. Lakini sisi kama Jambore Initiative, kitu tunaomba kwao ni kwamba wao watutambue na watujue kwamba sisi tupo na sisi tuko tayari kuzunguka na kwenda kuhakikisha kwamba kila mtu atapata barakoa ama ataweza kuhamasishwa kuhusiana na janga hili la corona.
Elsewhere, Deputy Minority Chief Whip, who is Kiminini Member of Parliament, Chris Wamalwa, has cautioned Kenyans and members of the public against unscrupulous businessmen who are out to sell fake face masks to the public during these trying moments of COVID-19.
Mimi nilikuwa na mpangilio kupeana masks, lakini watu wakasema hatuwezi kukula masks kwa sababu njaa imekuwa mingi. Hii kafi vile iko, masharti yenye yamewekwa, kazi zimepotea. Watu wamekuwa maskini, watu wanakufa njaa. Siku ya leo tumepeana chakula. Na mimi naomba kamati ya COVID hapa Trans Nzoia, tunaomba hii chakula ifikie those vulnerable families wakati mgumu huu wa corona. At a time like this, tunakuwa na unscrupulous business people. Wanakuja na zile zenye ziko defective. Ukimwaga maji, naona maji inapita. So kulingana na Ministry of Health, zile masks ziko recommended ni 3ply, ukiweka maji iwezi ikapita. Na wakati unaongea haiwezi ikapita alafu ikaambukiza mtu mwingine.
Elsewhere, since the spread of coronavirus, employees, especially those working in office settings, were forced to work from home. Some are required to attend meetings virtually via different platforms using their phones and laptop. It is this reason that Kenya's gaming tech startup, Usiku Games, saw a need and launched the first made-in-Africa video conferencing system that will enable users enjoy better quality calls with unlimited attendees, and which is more affordable. Andrin Kilemi with more.
Kenya's gaming tech startup Usiku Games has launched a web-based system dubbed Gumzo that will enable its users to hold meetings at a cost of 100 shillings per week.
Gumzo actually was inspired by the COVID-19 situation currently. You realize that right now there's a lot of anxiety, families are separated, there's that disconnect that is existing currently as a result of physical distance. So Gumzo was actually inspired by this particular situation. What makes Gumzo so different when it comes to even usage of bandwidth is that the servers sit here in Africa. The servers actually sit in South Africa at the moment. And Gumzo will even go to the rest of Africa.
Kulingana na afisa wa mauzo kampuni hiyo Alex Owiti, ni kuwa mfumo huo ni salama kwa matumizi ya kila mmoja na unatumia nambari ya simu kwa usajili.
All right, we apologize for that mix-up. Of course, that story will be coming to you in our subsequent bulletins. Moving on. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair has said African nations should use antibody tests to find out whether the slower spread and lower mortality rate of the new COVID-19 cases in the continent is due to data or more resilient population. Blair says the information will guide leaders in deciding whether to extend lockdowns or other restrictions that are damaging economies.
very beneficial for Africa is there are antibody tests that can tell you whether you've had the disease. These tests they vary in accuracy, and so a lot of Western countries haven't wanted to use these simple antibody tests for knowing whether one individual has had the disease or not. But where these antibody tests could be really valuable, I think, in an African context, is that they are accurate enough that you could sample your population and at least, like a kind of opinion polls, show what percentage of the population has likely been affected. And you could do that in cities, and you can do that obviously in the outlying areas. And I think that would be a very worthwhile investment by Africa, because they're cheaper to use tests. And you would at least see then, you'd start to get some knowledge of, is it that the disease has spread but people are resilient and asymptomatic, which actually I think a lot of African cases are asymptomatic, or is it that actually it hasn't spread? And this would be very important information to know. Africa, it can't and shouldn't mimic the policies of Western countries. It's got to take its own path out of this crisis and do it in a way that recognizes that Africa presently on COVID is actually in a better position than much of the rest of the world. And it's therefore got to make sure that, yes, it keeps in that good position, but it also takes account of these other challenges. Otherwise, I fear that we end up in a situation where the measures that we take to suppress COVID end up doing really fundamental damage.
All right, that brings us to the end of today's edition of News Deck. But before I leave, let me read some of your feedback on Facebook. David Unda says, I love TV47. We love you back, David. Peter Cherutich says, TV47 is very clear. Lil Kim Vic Kimathi on Facebook says, watching TV47 live from Juba. Very clear. Thank you for your feedback. That brings us to the end of today's edition of News Deck. I am Abu Bakr Abdullahi. On behalf of the entire team that made this production possible, bye for now, but enjoy the rest of our programs.